So what's up guys, it's Ash here and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video guys, I've got some custom tactics and player instructions for the most overpowered formation in FIFA 23, the 4-3-2-1. It's team of the season, so if you guys need any coins, make sure you check out MMOXP.com. Their link is down in the description. They're fast, cheap and reliable, and if you use my code Rema, you can get yourself a nice 5% discount. Alright guys, so starting off with the custom tactics for the defensive style, you guessed it, we have this on balanced. Now the reason we have this on balanced is because it gives you the most control over your defense. When you need to press, you're able to press, but then when you want to drop off, be a little bit more passive in your approach, you're also able to do that. You're not able to do that with the other options because they're very one-dimensional. For example, constant pressure, you're always pressing. Drop back, you're always dropping off. So balance just allows you to do whatever, whenever. Now moving on to the defensive width guys, I like to have this on about 45. Now the reason we do this is so we can primarily defend in a narrow and compact shape. This will block the attacks through the middle, which is the most important thing you guys need to do when you're defending. The only reason we don't have the width lower than this is because it's still important to maintain a little bit of width to your defense so you're able to cover the wings in case your opponent tries to go down the wing. That is why we don't want to have the width too low. Now moving on to the depth guys, I like to have this on about 60 at the moment. Now the reason I have it on this is so we're not constantly getting pinned back by having a super deep and low defensive line, but we're not also going to get through-balled all the time either because it's not ridiculously high at the same time. So we go for like 60 as it's really nice and balanced, where sometimes you can sit a little bit deeper, other times you can push higher. You can really choose and you really have that balance. Now moving on to build-up play guys, speaking of balance, we have this on balance. Now the reason we have this on balanced is because it is the most controlled form of build-up. When you want to play slowly, you're able to do that. When you want to speed up and play a bit faster, you're also able to do that. So balance really does give you the variety and it allows you to switch up your type of build-up whenever you need to. If you use something like slow build-up, for example, you always have to play slowly. So it's not always the best idea to have it restricted. Now moving on to chance creation guys, I suggest direct passing. This is because it's the most meta option you can use, where your attacking players will bunch up against the defenders, so you can do the really overpowered 1v1 isolation plays. Players also make the extra movements in the box so you can get off that extra pass to guarantee those goals. Direct passing is super important in my opinion. Now moving on to the attacking width guys, I like to have this on about 47. Now this isn't a specific number you have to use, but the reason I do this is because I don't want to have the attacking width too low to the point where it feels like my players are sat on top of each other. I'm sure you guys that play with narrow formations will understand what I mean by that, where your players just feel way too close together. It's not always a good thing. On the flip side, we don't want to have a super high width, otherwise this feels like a 4-3-3, which is not what this formation is, so we just go for 47 as it works for me. Now moving on to players in box guys, I like to have this on 6 as we can get some players into the box to create those chances, but we don't overcommit the entire team to the point where we get counter-attack. So it's important that we don't commit everyone forward, but it's important that we still have some people in the box. Now moving on to corners and free kicks, I have these both on 1 because there is a corner kick routine that I use which requires both of these to be on 1. Link to that in the top right hand corner of the screen. Now moving on to the players you want to use guys, in the striker position, because it is a one striker formation, I suggest going for a nice well-rounded player. This is because you have to compensate for the fact that there's one striker instead of 2 in this formation. So where you could get the balance between 2 strikers in a 2-striker formation, you have to get that all in one player in this formation. So I suggest going for a nice well-rounded striker, somebody that can shoot on either foot, somebody that has decent skill moves and dribbling ability, basically somebody that can do a bit of everything, as it definitely restricts your team a lot less. Now moving on to the right centre forward and the left centre forward, the left forward, right forward, whatever you want to call them, you want to use like good winger style players. These are players that obviously have really good pace and dribbling stats. The 5-star skill moves are ideal as you can really trick your way past your opponents, super useful, but just use really good winger style players as these are your main outlets in the team. You're not going to want to use slow clunky players with no creative ability, otherwise you might struggle. Now moving on to the right centre mid, I like to go for a more box to box style midfielder. This is somebody that's going to attack and defend and have a bit of a free role in the team. So you're going to want somebody with a nice well-rounded card, and if you can get it, a high work rate as you get the maximum contribution in both attack and defence. Now moving on to the middle centre mid, we actually use a more defensive minded player. This is somebody that's going to stay back, break up the play and add that defensive security for us. You're going to want somebody with a really good defensive card, and if you can get it, a medium-high work rate is you get the maximum contribution in defense, and they're not too bothered about going forward. Now moving on to the left center mid, guys, we use an actual attacker here. This is because this player is not actually going to have to play as a center mid in game. Don't worry, the player instructions will cover this, but you can get away with using an actual attacker here. So you could use an Mbappe, a Neymar, an Alouara, and basically you don't have to worry about the defensive stats on the player that you're putting here. Now moving on to the left back, I like to go for a more attacking minded fullback. This is somebody that's going to contribute going forward for me, so I like to have somebody that is able to do so. I don't want to use somebody that can't shoot or cross if they're going to go forward for me. Do you get what I'm saying? Moving on to the right back, I like to go for a more defensive right back. This is somebody that's going to stay back, so you know it balances out the left back as we have one attacking fullback and then one more defensive fullback. That's just something I like to do. Don't have to copy it if you don't want to. As for the centre backs, these need to be those meta defenders. These are the players with really good pace, a medium-high work rate, and basically good physicality and good defensive animations. You can really pick whoever you want, but just make sure your defenders are good, otherwise you're going to have a really tough time, I think. As for the goalkeeper, yeah, just throw anyone you want in, because honestly, keepers do not make a difference in this game. Now, moving on to the player instructions, guys. On the striker, I like to have him on stay central and mixed attack. Now, the reason we have him on stay central is because we don't want him getting lost on the wings. We want him to stay central, so he's always where our striker needs to be. Stay central, super important. We also have him on mixed attack, as I feel like you get a lot more out of the player this way. If you have him on getting behind, he's always doing the same one-dimensional robotic runs, and you're forced to play that boring through ball style all the time. If you have him on mixed attack, they get more involved in the build-up and you get a lot more out of the player. Honestly, this is a super underrated instruction that you guys could try. Now, moving on to the right forward, I have him on comeback on defense. Now, this is because it makes the team defend in a 4-4-2 shape. The reason we do this is because the 4-4-2 is a much more superior defensive formation than the 4-3-2-1, based on the fact we get that extra midfielder, meaning we have better coverage of the wider areas when we are defending. Super important to defend in a 4-4-2, as it makes this formation all the better. So put this player on comeback on defense and it will make it defend in a 4-4-2. Now moving on to the right centre mid, for the box-to-box player, we have him on the default settings and then cover centre. We have him on the default settings because he's a box-to-box, he has a free roll, we let him do whatever, we don't really restrict him, and then we just put him on cover centre, so he does defend as one of the centre mids in the 4-4-2. Now moving on to the middle centre mid, where we use a more defensive minded player, we have him on stay back while attacking, stay on the edge of the box cross, and cover centre. Stay back means he's not going to be bothered about going forward because he is defensive. Stay on the edge of the box for cross means in case he does, you know, get a little bit too confident and decides to charge up the pitch, he won't go and commit himself into the penalty area. It's just like a fail safe, really. Moving on to the left centre mid, where I said you can use an actual attacker, we have him on get forward, get into the box cross, and cover wing. Get forward means he's going to fly forward because he's an attacker. Get into the box cross means he's not going to be scared to commit into the penalty area. And then most importantly, we have him on cover wing, so he defends as a left mid in the 4-4-2 shape. This is why I said it's not important to have really good defensive stats here, because they're not actually going to have to play as that centre mid. So the way this team's going to set up when we don't have the ball is the back four will be the same. In my case, Havertz will be the left mid, Casemiro will be the left centre mid, Pogba the right centre mid, and Jairzinho the right mid. That's just how this sets up. Now moving on to the fullbacks, the left back, my more attacking fullback, we have him on balanced attack and overlap. We do this because the 4-3-2-1 is obviously a narrow formation, and sometimes it's important to get a wider option. So by putting him on balanced overlap, he's going to make the overlapping runs to add extra width, so we always have that wider option. Now moving on to the right back, my more defensive fullback, stay back while attacking and overlap. Stay back means we're always going to have at least 3 defenders back, but we have him on the overlap run type in case I do send him on a run forward manually, so he makes the overlapping runs in case he does get sent forward. As for the centre backs and the goalkeeper, these are on the default settings and I do not touch them. But yeah guys, they're my custom tactics and player instructions for the 4-3-2-1. If you have enjoyed, please be sure to drop this a thumbs up, sub to the channel if you are new, and don't forget to turn on notifications. And with all that aside guys, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.